Why is it I am Darth Vader, but I'm holding Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber? Why is it when I breathe in this mask, it covers up my eyes, I can't see a damn thing? It's crazy to think that The Force Awakens only came out 2 years ago, and then Rogue One only came out a year ago, and now we have The Last Jedi. I personally really like The Force Awakens. While I do acknowledge that it was kind of ripping off A New Hope, it was sort of a lot of the same beats, I thought there was enough originality in the film, and it continued the story in a satisfying way that I felt intrigued by the film as a whole. It was really enjoyable. It was a great popcorn feature. It was emotional. It was everything that I want out of a Star Wars movie. It was the perfect continuation of the original 3 movies. If there needed to be a continuation, that was the best way to do it. And then we had Rogue One, which I personally didn't like that much, besides the 3rd act. The whole movie was pretty boring to me, but it had some great cinematography and looked exactly like a film that would have came out when the original trilogy was made. So Disney's really been pumping out these features like crazy, and now we have The Last Jedi. When that opening scroll started, I didn't feel the same excitement that I felt during The Force Awakens. That simply has gone away at this point, because I no longer have to wait 10 years for another Star Wars movie to come out. But I will say that The Last Jedi was still an amazing movie. It is extremely satisfying. It takes the characters that I loved from The Force Awakens and expands on pretty much all of them. I'll say it never completely shocks me. The film ends exactly how I would expect it to end, but it's a lot of the themes that are introduced in this movie that have never shown up in any other Star Wars movie that makes the film worthwhile. It is a perfect sequel to have to The Force Awakens. And after watching it, I kind of question where J.J. Abrams is going to take the 9th film, seeing as this film, being 2.5 hours, did a lot. It's really hard to talk about this movie without talking about spoilers, but I'll really quickly go over a lot of the good things. The story was pretty balanced. There was times during this movie where I was feeling the length of the film. The film is 2.5 hours long, whereas The Force Awakens and a lot of the other Star Wars movies are 2 hours long. A lot of the characters who were in the last film are done a lot better here. Rey is still expanded upon. She was my favorite character in the last film, and she's still my favorite in probably this film. She's expanded upon a lot. Kylo Ren is a way more interesting villain. Kylo Ren's character is expanded in a way that perfectly complements how he was in The Force Awakens. If you watch The Force Awakens and then watch this film, you will see a perfect evolution of a character. He is done magnificently. Other characters that were in the last film are done even better here. General Hux, for instance, I thought he was the lowest point in The Force Awakens. I thought he was a horribly done character with nothing interesting to him, and even Domhnall Gleeson's portrayal of him I thought was pretty boring. In this film, he's a lot better. And then other characters who didn't get that much screen time in The Force Awakens or were simply introduced there are brought back into this film, but they have smaller roles, to the point where I wonder if Rian Johnson was directing this film, seen The Force Awakens, and then he was like, well, there's too many characters, I don't even know what to do with most of these. There are characters who you may not like what happens to them. I, for one, was happy with all the little twists and turns. I don't think the film took any major turns where I thought, oh man, this is Empire Strikes Back level of surprise. The film generally took turns that I figured it would take, but there's twists here and there where I was like, I was surprised that they did it in this movie rather than waiting for the next movie, because after seeing The Force Awakens, I had a sense of where the story was going to go. After this movie, I have no idea where the 9th film is going to go. I have no idea how on earth they're going to make a 9th film. They're really wide open, and they can't really rip off stuff from the original trilogy anymore. As The Force Awakens took a lot of stuff from A New Hope, The Last Jedi takes a lot of stuff from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And for both films, I don't criticize them for that. But what I'm saying is that now they have ran out of stuff to take from the original trilogy storyline wise, because that gives a completely open realm for the 9th film. And it's going to be interesting when J.J. Abrams comes back, seeing as he set up the films with The Force Awakens, and now Rian Johnson almost destroyed a number of those storylines and said, well, wait, we're not going to really go in this direction. No, we're going to do something different here and there. It makes for an interesting film. I wonder how much J.J. Abrams was actually involved in this film and how much he was okay with, because a lot of the mysteries brought up in The Force Awakens are extremely challenged here, and not even that, but they're almost destroyed at some points. Mark Hamill steals this film. I might have said earlier that Rey was my favorite character in the film, but it's really Luke. Luke is this film. He owns this film the same way Han Solo owned the last film. I think that might be another reason why I like The Force Awakens just a little more. It's a biased reason, but it's because Han Solo was in it. Now he's not in this film, and he was my favorite character in the whole series. But my second favorite character in the series is Luke Skywalker. I really liked his journey in Return of the Jedi. I liked that he was an overly good and optimistic character. That's kind of the traits that Rey has in this film. Even when she's challenged by the dark side, she very easily says no to it. Some people might think she's too perfect, but I think that there are people in the world who are like that. Not everybody has challenging and complicated flaws in their character, like Luke does. In the original trilogy, he had flaws at first. By the time Return of the Jedi came around, he was a flawless character because he had become a full Jedi. In this film, it shows that he has actually made some mistakes in the past. And I think that just brings a bigger moral to the story. I mean, in my opinion, I think it would have been better off had they just never made any of these films, left it at Return of the Jedi, and I think of Luke being one of those great, legendary, awe-inspiring gods to look up to. But this film really challenges that. They say, hey, people that you look up to, people that you inspire to be, aren't as perfect as you think they are. And I think that's a very interesting moral to have for this film. And one that really resonates with today's world. Unlike what Return of the Jedi shows, he does have flaws, he has made mistakes, and it ends up being a redeeming story arc for him. He completely redeems himself by the end of the film. The film takes a direction I was questioning if they would ever do this in any of the Star Wars films, especially with Disney in charge, because I was wondering if they would ever be able to do a story like this, but they did it. They basically did a story about the difference between religion and faith, the battle between the two. There is a complete difference between religion, the strict guidelines of religion and all the rules to it, the dogma of it, and that's kind of what happens in the prequels. In the prequel series, the Jedi are so caught up in how everything's structured that the dark side goes completely over their heads. They don't see any of it happening. Throughout the entire films, the Force has always been something that's tied to only Jedi and Sith. Even in the first movie, A Phantom Menace, they straight up say that people are measured by their midichlorians. And I always kind of questioned if George Lucas was later on going to counteract that and say, the reason I introduced those in the prequels was because the leaders in the prequels, the Jedi leaders, messed everything up. They're not paying attention. They're following too many rules. In this film, they're all about breaking the rules. I mean, that's what this film's about. It's about breaking the rules of what a Jedi and a Sith is. It also shows that people who have the Force can come from anywhere, that it's less about the religion, but it's more about the faith. The film really is about Luke, who thinks Jedi and Sith are so tied to the Force, he breaks that connection apart, and he ends up redeeming his faith, basically, finding the Force again. What I'm saying is, it's hard to discuss it when you haven't seen the movie, but it's got some great themes in there. I really don't think everybody's gonna like the film. I think there's gonna be some people who are really challenged by it, who are gonna be a little mad by some of the things that happen. Overall, they introduced themes that had never been present in any of the Star Wars films. It brought new stuff to the table. There's so many more new creatures and ships, so that's always fun. And a different turn for all the characters. All the characters' arcs are developed really well, I think. Save a couple of them, though. We'll get to that in the spoilers. Alright, now let's talk some spoilers, because there's a lot of them. Where do we start? The first scene with Luke, it's the same scene from The Force Awakens where Rey is throwing, holding out the lightsaber to him. And all he does is he grabs it, he just chucks it. That's it. He doesn't want anything to do with it. That is the first indication that we get that this film is going to take a couple different turns than you'd expect. Snoke is dead. They kill Snoke, and you think for a second that Kylo Ren's going to turn, because Rey, basically doing what Empire Strikes Back does, she goes out to get Kylo Ren, but also like Return of the Jedi, where Luke thinks he can turn his father to the good side. Rey thinks she can turn Kylo Ren to the light side, and it doesn't work. She actually gets to Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren kills Snoke, which was kind of surprising to me, because, you know, usually they would kill Snoke in the third film, because that's like, if they're copying the original trilogy, that's how it worked. But no, they kill him in this film. He doesn't turn to the light side. He wants to take over the Emperor, not the Emperor, the Snoke, I guess, whatever. He wants to take the Supreme Leader's position. He does become the Supreme Leader in this film. During the third act, Luke does something with the Force that we've never seen before. He is sitting at the island, and he uses his mind to project basically an actual version of himself to the salt mine. And he goes there and he fights Kylo Ren. But when Kylo Ren finally thinks he's defeated him, Luke, it appears that he's just basically a ghost, because Luke's not actually there. He's there as a distraction to save what's left of the Resistance, and the Resistance runs away, and they all pile onto the Millennium Falcon, and that's all there is left of the Resistance. The Force, it just is too strong for him that he ends up dying having to do that. And it's a very dramatic, emotional scene where he's just sitting there alone on the island staring into the sun, just like how he was staring into the sun when he was first wanting that adventure in A New Hope. Does the same thing here, and then he dies. His cape goes flying in the wind. It's a really beautiful scene. Yoda shows up again, which was great. It was Puppet Yoda. He has a lot of great words of inspiration, and he's still that crazy hermit Yoda from the Dagobah sequence in Empire Strikes Back. I really like that Kylo Ren destroyed his mask, because really, the reason the mask exists was because they wanted him to look like Darth Vader, especially in the last film. I don't know if that was J.J. Abrams' decision. I'm thinking it was more of Disney saying, you need the Darth Vader-looking character in this film. But in this film, they said, screw it, we don't need that mask anymore, and he destroys it, and now he's just Kylo Ren with the scar across his eye. He's representing a turn to the dark side a lot better than Anakin Skywalker, portrayed by Hayden Christensen, ever did. I think that it's like they're having a second go at that. Rey's parents, they say that, well, Kylo Ren tells her that they're just junkyard slaves who, well, not slaves, but they were junkyard drunks who sold her off for money and booze, basically. Which, if that's true, then that's great, because I like that Rey has no connection to anybody who's like famous in the Star Wars universe. Like, I'm glad she's not Han Solo's kid. I'm glad she's not Luke's kid or Obi-Wan Kenobi's kid. I like that she's a nobody. In fact, with the final shot of this film, one of the characters from earlier in the film, who was a kid, you find out he could use the Force, and they do it in a very subtle way. And that's the ending of the film, and I really think that was the whole point of this film. It was that people who have the Force, people who have faith, can come from anywhere. They don't have to have a connection through family to be strong with the Force. They can come from literally anywhere, just like Rey. The things I didn't like really was, I don't like Finn's storyline in this film. He meets a new character named Rose, which I thought Rose was a pretty interesting character, but I think she just got a shitty storyline. I think that's what it really came down to. I think she got a pretty bad storyline, and Finn got a bad storyline. It's like the director, you know, he got all these characters, and a lot of them he kills off. Like, Hux dies, Captain Phasma dies, Snoke dies, and I was like, I'm glad to see all these characters go, because there was a lot of them, but also they have a lot of great deaths. I mean, and a lot of them were expanded upon better in this film. Captain Phasma, I think, is better in this film, but she dies. Hux was a lot better in this film, but he needed to die. Snoke was a lot more interesting in this film, but I'm glad they killed him off, because no one really saw that coming. It was great. And now we have this new character named Rose, who I was really hoping to be a great character, and it seems like she could be. Central reason that she's in this film connects to the ending of the film, and I think they're leading up to that, but I'm not quite sure. But overall, she still had a boring storyline with Finn. it's like he didn't know what to do with Finn's character in this film. Poe Dameron has a great storyline. Poe Dameron, who was kind of boring in the last film, really takes the mantle of what Han Solo used to be. But whereas Han Solo's story sort of ended with Empire and he didn't really do anything in Return of the Jedi, Poe Dameron has a really great story arc in this film. He really has to learn about what it is to be a leader. There's a great dynamic between him and Princess, well, General Leia, but there's a great dynamic between those two. Oh, Laura Dern's character. I like Laura Dern in the film. I thought her character was great. I think she actually had a great little arc herself, and I think she was a focal point for Poe Dameron's arc in the film. But Finn, it seems like they don't know what to do with him, and it makes me sad because he was such a great character in the last film. He had a really good arc in the last film. Now he's just with the Resistance, and he likes Rey, and that's about it. Is there really much more to him? Kind of not. He almost could have been cut out of this film, but at this point they can't really do that. I'm sure they signed some 3-movie contract with John Boyega, but I really wish they would do more with his character, and they really didn't. They had him go on this journey to go get this hacker who needs to go onto the Resistance ship so they can stop the Empire, well, the First Order, from tracking them. And I don't know, I'm all for superfluous, like, storylines that go nowhere. I mean, I love Big Lebowski. So, and now that movie is a superfluous storylines that kind of go nowhere. I'm all for the fact that they would go to this planet to go get a guy who then they can't actually get that guy, but they have to get this other guy who's played by Benicio del Toro, who ends up turning on them. I'm all fine with that, but it was just the execution of it all that made it really boring and not interesting. And maybe it was because it was the third storyline going on in the film, because we also still have the Resistance running away from the First Order, and we have this other storyline that's Rey and Luke. So yeah, there is a lot going on in this film. They go to this casino planet, and I think this casino scene is going to be one of those make it or break it kind of moments in Star Wars. I thought the casino scene was stupid. Now, it has worked in movies before in the Star Wars universe, like they've done a bar. Mos Eisley is basically a Western bar. But there's something about it that just seems like it could exist in space. It's the same with that 50s diner in Attack of the Clones. There's something about it that could fit in the Star Wars universe. It's still space-like enough. And I know these movies are all about paying homage to older films, and the original film was really like that. It was paying homage to like samurai and Western films, and this film still goes back to those roots. There's a lot of homages to like Akira Kurosawa films, and there's a lot of samurai films and still Western films in this movie. That salt mine looks like a desert basically, but I don't know, there's something still about that casino scene that just didn't seem space-like enough. It just seemed like it was people in tuxes and they were using real gold coins, and I'm like, well, there's nothing about this that seems different from the real world. It just seems like a real world casino. It's all, on paper it seems fine, but it just didn't work to me. There was something about it just seemed kind of pushed in there. And there was no way to get that scene out of there because you kind of needed it for the end of the film, so I get why it's there, but the whole casino just seemed like they could have done something different to it. Maybe they'll talk about it more later, maybe other people think differently, maybe if I see it again it'll be different, but for me I think it was silly. I liked Benicio del Toro in the film, but he just hardly is in the film. He doesn't do much either. Well, I like the Porgs, so if anyone wants to know what I think about the Porgs, I love the Porgs. I think they were great. Princess Leia Shooting Star. It's amazing, because we get to see Leia use the Force finally. I was so happy to see that. The music comes in, it's Leia's theme. Everybody was clapping. I'm like, yeah, this is great, but why does it look so silly? Her ship blows up, and Admiral Akbar is dead, by the way, which makes me incredibly sad, and he doesn't say it's a trap, even though they literally fall into a trap, and he had so many... I'm just kidding, that would have been stupid, but then Leia is in space, and it looks like Guardians of the Galaxy, the same way Guardians of the Galaxy did it, where they're just kind of sitting out in space, and it seems like she's dead, but then she wakes up, and then she flies towards the door, using the Force, and I'm like, okay, one, does this not still follow the rules of space in these movies? Because I thought if you go into space, you're dead, but I get it, it's a sci-fi movie, it's a space movie, so it's like, maybe that's not true. It's supposed to be a fantasy, so I guess you can take liberties. I mean, they did in Guardians of the Galaxy, even though I'm pretty sure Gamora was still in the planet's atmosphere somewhat. They're not even near an atmosphere in this movie. She just is straight up in space. I don't know how to feel about it. For me, I was thinking too much about the physics of it all. It just seemed like the way they set it up, there could have been a better way to do it. Even with the ship blowing up, and if they did like a slow-mo time of it blowing up, if she just quickly zoomed to the door and then opened the door as the compartment was still blowing up, and then she passed out. If they could have done it like that, I think it would have been more visually pleasing and not look as silly. In here, it just looked silly. You shouldn't be thinking of physics when you're watching a Star Wars film, but it really was the way it was shot and set up. It really was that. It wasn't the concept that was bad. It just was silly when it's shown on screen the way it was. It just looked silly. But that's a nitpick. That really is just a nitpick. Same with the casino. These are nitpicks. The movie overall is great. It is a great movie. I don't think it's as fun as The Force Awakens, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a more serious film. And the characters mostly all get an overall continuing arc. And I'm excited for the 9th film because it's wide open for what could happen. There's so many different ways you could take it. Episode 8, I mean, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. I mean, I can't give it a 9 just because I don't know. I'd have to watch it again to really... And it's definitely not a 10 out of 10. I don't even compare it to the original trilogy. There's no point. I think I like The Force Awakens just a tiny bit more, but that's really for biased reasons, like Han Solo, really. And the fact that it's kind of shorter and it's more fast-paced. But I think this film does probably a lot more newer things, and it has a lot more to offer, and it has a lot more themes to it. So, you go see it, and you're probably going to see it anyway, so... decide for yourself.